Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Chatter. And today I have the absolute privilege of being joined by Adam B. Coleman. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, you first came across my radar when you were on Zuby's show. So I'm a big fan of Zuby. Really like his stuff. And it's always great I find I get a lot of interviews or people that I'd like to speak to from watching other shows and be like, oh, I want to talk to that guy. And it seems really unoriginal sometimes, but it's almost like I feel like I want to continue the conversation that people have been having sometimes, and that's why I invite people on. Do you know what I mean?
No, I know exactly what you mean. And there's no conversation is exactly the same. So I think I don't blame you.
Well, what can I say? So anyway, the last night, let's start here, because last night we went back and forth on Twitter a little bit, and you'd posted this clip of Alex Jones, a clip from August or October of last year, I think it was, and he was talking about how, we were looking at a big war in February, and all of a sudden it turns out that, he was, in this prediction at least, accurate. And so many people get so triggered whenever he makes, because he makes a lot of claims, right? A lot of claims. And I don't know what percentage are accurate. Like, that would be the mission for some sort of fact-checking god, but I don't think that person exists. He speaks too quickly for anyone to fact-check it fast enough. You'd be there to the end of time. But he seems to, elicit this reaction from a lot of people. What do you think it is about him that's so polarizing? And not even specifically Alex Jones, maybe. Just there are figures that seem to polarize people and get people so angry and riled up. And what do you think it is that we're seeing when people get just offended in unfathomable amounts by the sheer existence of an individual?
I think a lot of times those particular people hate the idea of the person rather than the person themselves. So, for example, it's safe to say that most people haven't listened to Alex Jones longer than a 2-minute clip, if at all.
Yeah.
Right. But they've heard Alex Jones's name linked with, let's say, Sandy Hook, the whole Sandy Hook situation, which he's apologized about. He admits he was wrong about, and trying to move forward from it. And obviously there's a lawsuit revolving around it, but, just the average person wouldn't really know who Alex Jones is other than what they hear about him. So if the narrative around a particular person is negative and most people are apolitical, at least in the United States, then they're going to lean on what they think they heard. We all do it because there's no way for you to know in detail about every person, even if they're public figures. So you kind of have to lean on, even someone who's down the street. Oh, I heard about John. John, the guy down the street, I heard he's a jerk. And then you go and talk to John, and you're like, oh, John's actually a really nice guy. And then you realize, oh, it's your friend who has some ulterior motive, who doesn't like him for whatever reason, something happened between them, and you're getting the in-between, and they're transferring over to you what you should think about that particular person. So I think that happens a lot. That's happened to me before as well. And so a lot of times before I make some sort of declaration about a particular, let's say, public figure, famous person, I have to find my reason as to why I like them or why I dislike them, or why I'm just kind of neutral about them. Instead of leaning on, what does my tribe say? What does my group say? Whatever, however that fits, politically, racially, class, whatever. I want to be able to decide for myself why I like this person, why I think they're a flawed person, why they have good things and bad things about them. So, Alex Jones, for example, is one of those people where, within the past couple of years, I actually watched interviews with him. And he's just a character. But at the same time, I think he really means well.
Yeah, totally.
And he does. It's one of those things where, is he a conspiracy theorist? Kind of, right?
I don't like that term.
Yeah. Well,
I feel
because
I feel that term has become weaponized. I didn't like the term already
yeah,
because most great investigative journalists are conspiracy theorists, because that's what every
yeah,
great investigative journalist like starts with, is a conspiracy theory, and then they go and check the
yeah.
facts. You know, I don't like that term. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, you're right. Especially over the past couple of years, it's been used heavily in a derogatory fashion when there's legitimate reasons. Um, one of the things for me, especially when they throw around that term, you call people conspiracy theorists, but you don't do anything to alleviate their conspiracy theories, right? Um, and so, like, I don't blame people for making that leap. I don't blame people, like the QAnon situation.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, a bunch of weirdo conspiracy theorists. Like, well, like it's based off of something, right? It's not coming from thin air. It's based off of something, but you don't do anything to help alleviate what's happening. If they think that, there's billionaire elitists who are trying to stop us and trying to take over the election, and then I think it was Time Magazine pulls out an article that says billionaire elitists fortify the election.
Yeah.
Like, you're not helping.
You're just trolling us at this point,
Yeah, exactly. So,
you said something really interesting there, actually. You said that most people are apolitical. Do you think that's the case? Like, what percentage do you think that is? If you had to put a rough guess on it.
Well, I kind of also base it off of, like, I've lived in a bunch of different places, and I talk to a bunch of different people, and in my day-to-day life. But you can also kind of base it off of party affiliation, because most people affiliate as independent. Now, depending on where you live, maybe independent means slightly to the right, slightly to the left, but they're not. If they find somebody that they like, they'll vote for that particular way. There were people, for example, who were independent, who were willing to vote for Bernie. And when Bernie was out, they did not want to vote for Hillary, and they voted for Trump, right? That is true independent right there. And everybody has their reasons, their reasoning for wanting to do X, Y, and Z. So that's why I always try to keep that in mind when I have conversations with people. Sorry, that was my dog.
It's all right. He's agreeing.
Yeah. When people have, these certain viewpoints, and especially on Twitter, like, Twitter is a hyper political arena. So even if it feels like everybody in that arena feels this particular way, this is not the norm. This is a very particular type of people who are showing up and expressing their viewpoints, who are already at least somewhat politically engaged. So I always try to keep that in mind, that there's the Twitter world, which has real people, but likely they're politically active. And then there's the real world, who just people who want to go to their job, come home, have a good time, and, watch some sports, make love to their wife, that kind of thing. and don't really care too much about politics, because a lot of them are kind of apathetic about politics. So
yeah, there's a really interesting source. I'm just going to get it up here and share it with you. It's from Gallup. It's like the different types of, it's the different, like, can you see that? Is that coming up?
no, it's not.
Okay, well, anyway, for the people who are at least, oh, actually, hang on, I know why it's not working. Aha, there we go.
There you
okay,
go.
can you see this now? Okay, so
Yeah,
this is just, I wanted to bring this up because when you were talking there, I was like, right, okay, what sort of percentage of people identify as independents? That was like the first thing I wanted to query. So I looked at this and I saw like the first few numbers here, and it was like 46%, 42%, 41%, and I was like, oh, so it looks like maybe it's going up. And then I went scrolling down, and I went the whole way, like through 2019, 2015, the whole way. You keep going down through 2008, 2006, and like the numbers are not changing. Like because I kind of imagined perhaps that there was a case where say people were becoming there was more people perhaps maybe registering as independent as America became more polarized, you know? And it turns out that that's not the case. So do you think there's just like a fixed group of people in there, like around 45% of the population, that are just totally like not on board with this like tribalism at all?
I think so. I mean, they might be tribalistic to a degree, but I also think that there's certain personality types that lean in either direction, who hold on to certain viewpoints, who get more and more politically involved. I also think that there are certain things that have happened recently that made people get politically involved, but not necessarily politically affiliated. And those are two separate things. So,
Like
for example,
yeah, for example, what?
yeah, for example, the whole critical race theory situation, which, by the way, the people listening, it wasn't just critical race theory. It was also gender ideology infused within, schooling, infused in, math, science, all types of different things. So there was a pushing of a narrative, and for a lot of parents, they didn't realize this was happening until COVID forced their kids to to do schooling from home. And then the parents saw more directly what was being taught to their kids. Also, there was a push to change curriculum after George Floyd. So that was another thing. So there were some schools that were already doing this. And then there were schools who said, this is the way we're going to move forward. And the agenda went through. So, when we look at Virginia, everybody was shocked. For me, I was kind of shocked, but I kind of wasn't, because as much as the mainstream media becomes not defensive, dismissive about the general public, I started noticing the more they're dismissive about the average person, the more that, because they typically lean left, the more that the left is going to lose. And so Virginia was a perfect example of that. They did not see that coming. And New Jersey.
Do you want to explain? Because like about 50% of my audience is from the UK. So
Sure.
sometimes they're not always like super duper. Like I pay attention to a lot of this stuff, but
Absolutely.
that's only because I find America both amusing and a warning sign for whatever's coming down the road. Because I feel like we are about 5 years behind. So I like to watch what's happening. But yeah, so do you want to explain for people what happened in Virginia and what happened in New Jersey, and then maybe we can go back and talk a little bit more about like what's actually happening here with this critical race theory debate, because I see so much rubbish from everywhere about it. I see one article and it's like, yes, critical race theory being taught to 3-year-olds, and then the other article I will see will be like, you're like, don't believe the crazy right wingers who say there's critical race theory, they're all lying to you because they're ideologues and terrorists. And I'm like, come on, like seriously, like there has to be something here or there wouldn't be so much outrage. And I guarantee it's not as extreme as anyone is saying, but like there's clearly something happening. So, like maybe you can go back for us and like lay a bit of groundwork about what's going on.
Okay, so the first thing about Virginia, what I'm talking about for the governorship of the state, it was between Youngkin and, forgive me, I can't remember the other guy's name because he lost. So, but Youngkin was a Republican, and so I really wish I could remember his name, but the other guy was on the Democrat side.
I'll look it up.
You look it up. Thank you. I appreciate that. But he was basically running off of Trump is bad and Trump is bad. That was essentially his message to the voters in Virginia. He pulled out a lot of big Democrat names. Kamala Harris spoke. He brought out some celebrities, all of that, and he got walloped. He got walloped because the big thing that was happening within the state of Virginia had to do with people's kids. And on top of that, masking their children. I think the mainstream media was completely dismissive of how big of an issue that was for parents. The masking of children going to school, the changing of curriculum involving matters of critical praxis, the gender ideology that was pushed in within schools, right? there's a reason why there was a huge push and shift in school choice, including homeschooling within the United States in general. COVID was a big awakening for a lot of parents. But from the political aspect, the having young can actually speak to the average American within his state about these things that they were legitimately worried about.
Yeah.
That's why he won. He spoke to the average person. Now, where I thought was interesting was how they tried to frame it as these are just a bunch of disillusioned people who watch Fox News too much, right? But the reality is that a lot of people, like I said, are kind of apolitical. Like even the chart that you showed before, I believe that's people who registered as.
Yeah, that's official people who have registered as it, yeah.
Right. But that doesn't show people who just, I think I'll vote, who just get up one day and vote for whoever.
Yeah.
Right. And that's also, I kind of include that when I say most people. I'll give you a perfect example as to how big critical race theory and this whole thing became. I was fortunate enough to get invited to go out to the Milwaukee area and speak, and talk about race and alongside James Lindsay and Mike Gonzalez.
Oh, you were with James. Nice guy.
Yeah. I
had him on the show last year.
Really
fun guy.
He's a real nice guy. Funny enough, I got to speak alongside him twice. But what was interesting about the event, the organizers of the event, No Better Friend Corp, they put it together. And, I was talking to them. I was like, how many people are you expecting? Because, I'm buying books. I'm trying to have them brought out there. They're like, maybe like 200, maybe max 300. 600 people showed up.
Whoa. That's a lot.
And that caught them completely off guard. It was a full conference room that was filled up to the max, and they had an overflow room. It completely caught them off guard. Why? Because there were a lot of things that were happening within that area that parents were like, we need to know what's going on. They became active and they wanted to hear exactly what's going on. And so a lot of these people, some of them were obvious Republicans, and some of them were just like, I'm so confused. I don't know what's going on around here. Right. And so, 600 people showed up, double the amount that they thought was actually going to be there because it was that big of an issue. Now, it wasn't a big issue because they turned on Fox News one day and it was a story. It was a big issue because it was literally happening within their schools. I met people within, and I actually kind of became friends with them as well. People within these schools who are like, look at what they're doing, showing me. And I'm looking, math equations involving race, all different types of stuff.
What do you mean? Right. So here's maybe one of the things we should like focus in on, because I want to talk a little bit about that sort of disillusion, sort of like people seeking for honesty and truth and all that. But what are the parents seeing that is so abhorrent to them? Like, what is it that is being taught because I am still not even 100% like around with my head around what exactly, because I understand critical theory a bit, and I've spoken a bit about like intersectionality, critical race theory, and these sorts of like neo-Marxist based, not always, but like ideologies and like theories of the world. Like, so I'm vaguely versed in it, but like, what is it that like that the parents are so objecting to?
For one, because that's what I'm saying, like the whole critical race theory topic is kind of like critical race theory is at the forefront of a bunch of different issues that happened all at once. So for some of these parents, it was masking, right? Nothing in particular was happening at their school, but they were extremely pissed off about the masking of their kids. And then when they were protesting the masking, then the school board was going after them, right? And that became a whole big thing. For some of the schools, I've heard stories about, and this is in Wisconsin, this is in a relatively red area, a vast majority white racially area. They were separating children by race and doing what they call a race walk. right?
A
And
race
they did it.
walk? What's a
Yes.
race walk?
It's something like where you show is it a race walk? It's I'm trying to remember the exact term that they call it, but they basically put them in line and separate them by race to talk about privilege and the differences between them and all this other stuff. And understandably, a lot of parents were not cool with that. Um, there were situations where race was infused within a particular topic, not a topic, but a particular curriculum, right? And that's the critical race theory part. They say critical race theory is not taught in schools. They're actually right. It's critical praxis, right? It's the activity of infusing race theory within an already established curriculum, right? So no longer is it Bob and Jim get on a train and it travels X amount of distance to this destination. It's Bob and Jim are white and Tom is black, and it's that kind of thing. It's like, what does that have to do with this math equation? Why are they throwing race into this, right? I've seen stuff like that where they infuse these particular things. Mm-hmm. Same thing on the gender side within science, within even within math, talking about privilege. Even in my son's school, and I found this out later on. I'm in the state of New Jersey. They signed a bill last year. I should say the governor signed a bill last year stating that children starting in the middle school and up have to learn LGBT education.
What?
Yes.
What do you mean? But this is half the problem with these things is like, what do they mean LGBT education? Because it's like,
exactly,
like, what does that mean?
Exactly.
And
that's the problem.
It's not that like you shouldn't teach people to be accepting of people from different sexualities, races, genders, like etc. But I get the feeling that's not what they're talking about. I mean,
no,
it's just my sense. That's what they tend to. It tends to be about power and oppression. That's what it tends to be about.
Yes, and it's. I think it's purposefully vague, right? To talk about, let's say, gay history, history involving influential gay people, just like how they teach Black history, it's all about the struggle.
I'd take that class. Is Freddie Mercury in it? I'd take that class.
Oh, man. But, it's stuff like that. Yeah. But here's my problem. It's one thing to talk about, let's say, Black history, right? Mm-hmm. It's talking about race and, there's legitimate reasons to discuss race mm-hmm. within America. It's another thing to talk about LGBT or gay or anything revolving around that, because much of what you're talking about is sexuality. Because if you're saying gay is a sexual orientation. Mm-hmm. So let's say you say to a 9-year-old, oh, this is a famous gay figure. And they say, what does gay mean? Now you have to have that sexuality discussion. And so that is part of the problem. It's so vague because, like you said, what does that mean? LGBT education. To me, all I hear is now you have to explain sexual orientation. You have to have the sexual discussion outside of like a health class, right? You now have to talk about science revolving around it. You have to talk about history revolving around it. And if you want to infuse, similar type of thing with critical race theory and infuse gay people and then talk about privilege and all, it's so purposely vague that a lot of these, neo-Marxist kind of teachings can easily be put in there. Mm-hmm. And actually one thing I really respect about James Lindsay, because he talks about it a lot, and I think he's absolutely right, it is a perfect door for grooming children. Mm-hmm. Without a doubt.
Yeah. I mean, no one wants to go there, but yeah. I mean, it's weird because then the other thing about that phrase LGBT education, or was it LGBT?
Yeah.
Did you say LGBT? So
yeah,
like there's the LGB part, and that's almost easier to explain to a kid. It's like this woman likes women, or this guy likes guys. Like that's mm-hmm. easy to explain. It's like the and this is not to like deny trans people's right to exist or anything, like deny their this, you know, once you're your body, man, do what you want. But the it's a more complex biological discussion at that point, you know, because then you have to because then if you're going to be truly honest about it, you have to go into like the discussion about chromosomes and whether you can be a biological male or whether that's the way you should refer to someone, and then it just gets like unbelievably squirrely to try and discuss. And like, do you think we should be like trying to like? Do you think that should be brought up with children at all? Like, do you think that because like there's like trying to shelter them from there's trying to like preserve their innocence, right? But there's also attempting to educate them about the world. And I feel like half the problem with this discussion and most of the other things that like anger people and that are really high octane in the 21st century is that no one actually talks about what's the issue. You know, they just say it and that's it. So like, do you think we should be like talking to like young kids about any of these issues?
I think that, like, I'll use myself as an example. We talked about sex in school when it was age appropriate, right? And so, and it doesn't mean, listen, we live in a sexualized world, at least in America. You know, you see,
we're not far behind.
you know, we have sexualized imagery all over the place, right? And so that conversation, these ideas may already exist in a kid's head at a certain period of time, especially when they're around puberty, right? So it's going to happen. The question isn't about, well, they're going to be around it anyways. The question is about, should a state-funded institution be targeting children of a very young age to force, like I said, the governor in my state said you have to, by law, teach this particular curriculum revolving around LGBT, education, to starting in middle school, right? And so that's forcing. That's the government forcing this particular type of curriculum, forcing the conversation around sexuality to very young children. And like you said, the T part is confusing even to adults, right? And how do you think they're going to teach it to, let's say, a 10-year-old, 11-year-old? Well, some boys are born girls, but they have a boy's body, or whatever. Like it's confusing. And well, what's the follow-up question to that? Well, how do they know that they're really a boy or a girl? You see where this is going, right?
Yeah,
and so
like,
all this,
I feel for anyone caught in that frame of mind.
Yeah.
Like if anyone has to struggle with that, like I can't empathize with what that would be like, right? I can't.
Right.
I mean, I don't even suit a blonde wig, unfortunately. But like, do you think it's concerning, or do you think it even crosses some people's mind that like the critical praxis, like the critical theory part of it, and then the sort of gender twist that comes with it, and like the ideology essentially that's been taught, like it feels really weird that it can be and it's based in like neo-Marxist critical theory, which is like incredibly far left. And like, I'm not saying that they don't have a point in some of their things that they're saying. Sometimes the Marxists can have really accurate critiques of society. I mean, I don't really agree with their solutions, but it feels like we're kind of, it's almost like it's all been dressed up with this like PC like trimmings and some sort of like language like obfuscating what's actually happening, and it's like a back door for like some really radical ideas. And you could make the case that that's like what we should be teaching, in at least suggesting that to kids that this is an idea. I learned about a lot of things that I didn't agree with in school, or that weren't the correct thing. Like we learned about like fascism and communism and like lots of other like ideologies. So like maybe it should be something that should be like taught, but I think to me the problem is that it's not openly discuss that this is what we're doing. Do you know what I mean? And that seems to be the case with a lot of things.
No, I understand exactly what you mean. I think it's the difference between telling people what to think and supplying information for people to think about it, right? So, in general, I don't have a problem with age appropriate conversations about sexuality. You know, I went to health class, I learned about sex in school.
Mm-hmm.
I was of an appropriate age to have this particular discussion.
I didn't really learn that
Right.
much about it. I learned way more about it with some lovely women.
Right. I
But
didn't
that's
say
where
it was
most
the
people
best.
do like they're discovering. They don't get taught about this from school. Like, do you know what I mean? Like maybe they get taught like some of the stuff, but
Right. But that I think it's kind of like any other education. Like I one of the things that annoys me was people like, I just learned about this. How come I didn't learn it in school? Because that's not the point of school. School isn't supposed to teach you everything you ever fucking learn in your life. Like, like life is supposed to teach you about the most important things in your life. School is to give you the basic fundamental functions of learning things, right? The basic knowledge, right? After that, if you want to go to, you know, further your education and the higher learning, then that's up to you. But, you know, to act surprised that you didn't learn something as an adult, you're 35, you're figuring out, I just learned this. How come I didn't learn this at 17? That's not the point. Like, you're not supposed to learn, you're not going to learn everything at 17, by 17. But ultimately, like, it's, for me, it's about age appropriateness. It's about age appropriateness and how you teach it. And, you know, for the most part, the sexual discussion should be age appropriate, should be seen as something that is sensitive. And right now, it feels like it is so open and so wildly discussed. I don't want to say wildly, but it's so open and it's so kind of flippant how people discuss it. You know, something happened at my son's school, and you know, they had this activity where they gave these kids, what's the best way of putting it? They gave these kids kind of like a poster, and it says, I am, and you fill in the blank.
okay.
And my son said it felt like they were leaning on like sexuality. Like, what do they want you to put in here? But they said you can put anything you want. And so, you know,
What'd your son
one
do?
of his, he didn't put anything. He felt weird about it. He didn't feel comfortable involving himself about it. And so, like, one of his teachers, like, well, you know, discussing it, well, I'm a lesbian and I would put blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I remember having that lesbian gym teacher, but she didn't verbally say it. We all kind of knew it, but we didn't care. Right. Like, at no point do most people give a damn about your sexuality. Like, who cares? And, you know, someone would say, well, that's your privilege being straight. But honestly, most people don't care who I'm banging and who I'm not. They care if I'm a good person, am I respectful, whatever it may be. And so, like, no one should be treated with disrespect, no matter who you choose to have sex with, no matter what you choose to identify with. And so the criticisms about LGBT education within schools for kids of a particular age automatically gets turned into, well, you don't want to respect these people. You want to ignore that. That's not the discussion here, right? It's almost in the same way where we say, hey, how you're teaching about race seems kind of off, right? Oh, you just don't want race taught in schools. No, race has always been taught in schools. We've always talked about history, Martin Luther King, slavery. We've always talked about these things. That's not what we're talking about. For the vast majority of people that I talk to, that's not their issue. The people who are going up and protesting, they're not saying we don't want to talk about Black history. That is not their gripe. Their gripe is telling their white children that they're oppressors, right? That's their gripe. They're kids who don't fully understand what they mean by that. The kids who are being separated in lines, right? There was a school down in, I believe in Atlanta, where they were segregating children based off of race, right? These are real things that are happening in certain areas. Now, granted, it's not happening everywhere. And that's the thing that people on the left and the right need to understand. It's not happening everywhere, but the left needs to understand just because it's not happening everywhere doesn't mean that people don't have a legit concern to talk about it. You know, it'd be like, let's say if there was one town in Georgia that had slavery, they were like, well, slavery is not happening everywhere in America. Yeah, but it's still a concern. There shouldn't be open market slavery happening in Georgia,
No.
right? So we can at least talk about that. But on the right, they need to understand that this is a legit issue. It doesn't mean that every teacher is a left-wing radical, right?
What? You mean they don't all have purple hair and 17 pronouns? Like which?
Right. So like you said before, there needs to be a balance in this particular discussion. The concerns about LGBT education is not about should we respect these people or not. Obviously, on the left or right, you deserve respect. If you are a good person and you're a respectful person, you deserve respect. You should not be discriminated. That's not what this conversation is about. This conversation is about age-appropriate sexual conversation, and the conversation is about the narrative building surrounding race. Is ultimately what this comes down to.
What do you think that is? Because I've witnessed this happen over the past 10 years, right? And I've seen like suggestions that this all kind of came out of, or at least kicked off in a way, around the Occupy movement. And I don't know if you've seen the graphs that are like, I mean, it's interesting shit where it shows you the number of articles mentioning white privilege, political correctness, social justice warrior, like all of these kind of terms, right? And you see around 2010, like it just goes through the fucking roof. Like it's like it didn't exist, like boom. And I look at that and I go, right, okay, so like what's the goal here? Like what is happening? Is this people like waking up to the racism of the country, or is there like something else going on here within the like because like you know, because then once you go there's an agenda, you can go anywhere you want with it, and then I'm always really cautious to go that crazy, because then you go, well, you know, Operation Mockingbird, well, the CIA has people in every major media outlet, and therefore it must be the CIA trying to make our population more divided and fight with each other in order to foment a civil war so that China and Russia consume it. Do you know what I mean? Like once you decide there's an agenda, then it spirals out of control like with the speculation. But what do you think's actually happening here? Because I guess these terms didn't exist, man. Like they weren't thrown around. Like no one accused me of having privilege simply for existing. You know, and it's and obviously I'm fucking privileged. Like I live in the West. I live in 2022. Like I am educated. I have not grown up in like horrendous poverty. I mean, we weren't like fucking outrageously wealthy, but I mean, obviously I'm privileged, but I don't feel the need to acknowledge it with every conversation I have, because like 95% of the people around me are in the same fucking boat. Like all the, like anyone listening to this fucking thing is privileged because they have access to an internet connection and Spotify or YouTube or whatever, you know.
All right, so there's two parts. So there's the media part, because you mentioned the keywords. At least within America, there was a change, and I'm a guess in the UK as well. There was a change in how media outlets made money, right? So we started having a stark movement even before 2010, a movement away from newspapers and going towards online consumption, right? I believe at one particular time, it was like a large percent, I can't remember the numbers, it was a large percentage of people at one point got their news primarily from Facebook. And so now the legacy media have competition that didn't exist before. You have a large populace of people that were finding other ways to consume media, right? That became their threat. So now they're forced to adapt, right? But adapting also meant that they had to change their model. So you have someone like or like a newspaper like the New York Times, supposed to be the paper of record of high esteem. But now they basically are a subscriber base for the Democrats. It's very simply put for people who consider themselves Democrats. I think it's 90% of their subscriber base are Democrats, right? So they're catering to a particular audience rather than, yeah, I think the last time I heard it was about 90% subscriber base of Democrats. Yeah, right. And here's the thing, to be fair, it's not just the New York Times. It's a lot of media outlets are going in that direction. You look at an outlet, I used to really like Vice, right? When Vice came out, Vice was hardcore, Vice was real, right? Yeah. Then all of a sudden they went woke. Tim Pool talks about the transition. People can follow that. But all of us, they got investors. Investors want to know, how are we going to make money? They said, we're going to cater to the audience, right? The audience wants to talk about feminism. We're going to talk about feminism. And so they started going on these clickbaity titles, using all the keywords within the articles and especially in the titles, misleading article titles, all these different things that were algorithm friendly for outlets like Facebook, for example, that the algorithm realized that talking about police shootings and talking about racism and white supremacy, you put it all together, that let's push it to the top. So you started seeing this huge shift in how media is consumed, how media is pushed out, the narratives that are created, the leanings that are created purposefully so, to cater to a particular audience on the left and the right. The right, from my perspective, from the right, they felt like the legacy media, which even if it leaned a little left, was relatively reliable. That changed, and they noticed the change. So that's why you see more outlets like the Daily Wire coming about, who are saying we are from a conservative perspective, right? They're very open about it, right? And I respect that.
Yeah.
What I don't respect is the outlets who say we're objective, and they're clearly not. They clearly have a lean. They clearly have a bias. So I think there's that aspect as to why things changed. Also, why do you know white supremacy and why is it in the lexicon so much? What I noticed as someone who's watching the culture wars for, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years, it seemed to be wrapped up in this bubble of universities, right? And so I think a lot of people felt like, it's these kids and their crazy ideas. When they hit the real world, then, life will hit them.
Yeah, I heard that theory. How'd that go?
Yeah.
Like they took over the HR departments. Like that's how it went.
Well, not only did they take over the HR departments, and I'm actually writing about this now. I'm trying to work on my second book. But not only did it take over the HR departments, the key thing, well, there were two key matters. It was COVID and it was George Floyd. But especially after George Floyd, with the DEI movement, before George Floyd, corporations knew about DEI, right? They knew about bias training and all these things. Yeah. Some took it, some didn't, right? But there was a general consensus that they didn't really think that it was that beneficial, right? Corporations look at their bottom line. What is the cost benefit to doing this? Is it really beneficial to helping things? We don't know. George Floyd happens. There becomes this worldwide racial reckoning that now we all must discuss it, right? Race became the number one topic. Racism became the number one concern. And so for corporations, now they have to look at, how is this going to affect our bottom line? How are we going to be able to protect ourselves in case a situation happens? Everybody is hypersensitive about race. What if us at Pepsi have an incident where someone is suing us because of racism or claims of racism and it goes public, right? How do we lower our liability? You embrace DEI. And so I can't remember the months, but it was a matter of months in 2020 post George Floyd, where the DEI industry increased by 123%.
Wow.
So
So more than
that
doubled.
be yes, 123%. They full force embrace DEI as the method for their corporation to kind of live by,
Why do
even
you
to the
think?
point.
What do you think is driving them to accept that? Like, is it virtue signaling? Is it PR? Or is it like actually caring? And even yeah,
It,
what do you think?
it depends on the corporation. Um, for me, what I notice is that the corporations who care about PR make it known that they're doing certain things, right? So, for example, Amazon giving like $10 million to whatever organization that has black in it. Same thing with.
Maybe
You're laughing
let's
because it's
let's
true.
let's start a charity. Let's start loads of charities with the word black in it and see if we can get
Yeah,
funding from us.
would not doubt it. Would not doubt it. Put together like a terribly made trailer for your organization and just say, this is for the concerned black citizens of America.
Some diversity stock footage.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to be the face, man. I won't pull it off. Like I'm not gonna go full Trudeau with the black face. And
Exactly. But it was something similar to that. You see all these big corporations, Home Depot, for example, donating $1 million, basically from 100,000 to tens of millions of dollars that was thrown at all these different organizations, including Black Lives Matter, NAACP, you name it. And so they make it known we're doing our part. I think it was the CEO of Home Depot. Oh no, I'm sorry. It was the CEO of Walmart doing this long video talking about what they're going to do and how they're going to build this center and spend millions of dollars to build it and blah 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 blah. And we're going to do our part, right? They made that very public. That is the PR aspect, right? But then there's the liability aspect. That's where DEI comes in. The liability aspect is if I am an employee of, let's say, Walmart, and I say Walmart's racist, why? Because this is how it's treated. Walmart can now at least try to defend themselves and say, well, listen, we did our part. We have DEI, we have training, we have all these things in play. And so we're not as liable as you think we are when it comes to this particular situation, right? Now, I'm not a lawyer or anything. I don't know how exactly that would play out, but I'm making the safe assumption, and I've actually seen articles talking about, not even articles, I've seen writings from different business organizations talking about why corporations are using DEI, and they clearly say liability, right? They care about it, and it makes sense. Like I said, DEI didn't just miraculously appear as George Floyd died. They knew about it. It was just that they realized the climate of the country is changing. Race is becoming weaponized. We need to get ahead of this thing. What are we going to do? And DEI was already there, ready to go. And one other thing I'll mention about DEI: it is one of the most profitable industries to be in. It is a lot of money if you can basically get educated and come up through that particular industry. You will make a lot of money. I think on the low end, on average, I had it, but it was something like 70 grand a year.
I need to retrain.
Yeah, it was.
How to say? I could sell out for a few years.
But get this, they even have a director of diversity, a director level of diversity in a corporation where on average in America, I think it was somewhere around $140,000 or $150,000 a year on average.
So this is the free market correcting for all of the gender studies degrees.
Exactly.
Right? Like this is what's happened, right? Like these people have got smart enough to monetize it, and they're attempting to pretend like they care, but really they just need a job because being a barista at Starbucks ain't cutting it.
Oh man,
that's brilliant.
But see, to me, that's what I like to call, and I'm trying to coin this term. It's called big identity. You know, it is a profitable industry to be in.
Yeah.
From
So
the DEI industry and all these different organizations. Look at Black Lives Matter. They have so much money they don't even know how to manage it.
No, they have so much money they have to start fucking buying houses and stashing it. That's
exactly.
And no one cares. This is outrageous. No one gives a fuck that all the money is gone. Like, I cannot imagine. Like, if you're some fucking like little suburban mom who's like, yeah, Black Lives Matter, and like in the summer you're like, oh, that George Floyd, he got a real hard time. It's like, yeah, he did. He got fucking like horrendously killed, and she gave some money, and she like trying to like do the right thing, be a good citizen, and someone's fucking stolen that money. Fuck you. I don't understand why more people aren't like absolutely furious about this. But like, sorry, to go back to the DEI thing just briefly.
No, it's okay.
So you're saying essentially that this is like protection from the corporations for any sort of lawsuit where someone could come at them and be like, you're a racist corporation, and they can go, well, we did the training, and that's what it is. You think it's just like a legal protection?
In some ways, yes. So, and also, like, let's say someone tries to come after them on the public relations side. They say, well, listen, we've donated millions of dollars to these organizations.
Nice tax breaks.
We have that diversity training. Exactly. Nice tax breaks. We have all these diversity training. We're doing our part to da, 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 da. And then on top of what happens with DEI, they're hyper focused on hiring, right? So we have a very diverse workforce. Right, you'll start hearing these particular terms, right? So what they're trying to do is protect themselves from any type of racial targeting, and so that comes down to liability.
That makes so much more sense. That actually makes me feel better. Do you know what I mean? Like, no, really, because like, it's like, do you believe that they're like all of them have suddenly bought into this ideology? And like, if they have, then fair enough. Maybe we're the odd ones out. But like, it almost makes me feel better to know that the corporations are still the same, like bloodthirsty, like profit-driven, like I will not be sued level of like corporate greed. Because like, ultimately, that's what the corporation is there to do. The corporation is not there to lecture me on social issues, the corporation is there to facilitate the running of businesses and companies. Like, it's not there to change the social fabric or, like make the conversation more diverse or like any of these things. Like, that's not what a company is there to do.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it all depends on the company. If you look at like Twitter, for example, I believe they believe the ideology, right?
No, I believe they're crooks. They banned Nancy Pelosi's stock trade tracker. That's it. That's the mask off. Seriously, when they banned that person, I was like, there is no attempt to claim this is about like misinformation or neutrality anymore.
Oh yeah. But that's part of the ideology part, right? So they are clearly biased. They have their leanings. I've talked to people who work in big tech behind the scenes, and they confirm that it's actually worse than what we think. So yeah,
that's not what I want to hear, man.
Yeah, it's actually worse than what you think. As far as like the ideology and how infused it is within the culture. As far as like the targeting goes, the way it was kind of explained to me is that there's a lot of, it's very difficult to be like someone just one day goes in there and says, I'm going to take this person out, just some rogue admin, right? There's a lot of kind of checks and balances. They lean very heavily on algorithms. So the algorithm might take someone out, then you can appeal, then it'll go to a person, whether they're in the United States or not, who knows? So then that's kind of generally speaking how it goes. Now, can their algorithm be biased? Yes. Right. So the algorithm can do the dirty work for them, or at least be too aggressive and take out people based off of arbitrary things. Mm-hmm. So it really just depends on what happens. But as far as corporations go, big tech, they're full into the ideology. The problem is, like how you said, like the corporate greed part to make more money. The problem is that they're so big, and the market for what their industry, like a Twitter and Facebook and Google, that they have so much money that it doesn't even matter, right? It doesn't matter if they bleed a little money because they have so much money coming in. They're so extremely wealthy that they can pay everybody $100,000 to sit at home and cry about how oppressed they are, right?
I have legit heard that this is what is happening inside big tech. I have heard that the last 2 years has been just like that some of these firms have fallen to pieces, especially Facebook. And bleeding a little money, fair enough. What about if you lose half of the net worth of the company inside a couple of weeks? Like, is this the end of Facebook, or is like Zuckerberg too powerful?
I think Zuckerberg's too powerful. You know, but I think there are legitimate threats. You know, we can talk about man, I forgot what was the social media network that was nuked right after January 6th?
Parler.
Parler, thank you. You know, everybody makes that about January 6th when all of the organizations around the protests happened on Facebook.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, they were all no, seriously, I saw that they were all talking on fucking Facebook. It's like, oh really? It's like it's like, you know, well, all the world's drug deals are done in cash. It's you know, like, you create these like universal utilities. You can't expect them to like always be used for good things. You know, that's not gonna happen.
Yeah. But the whole part of the thing for me, that's big corporate, almost like espionage. You know, Amazon violated their own terms just to say F you to Parler. And Amazon is the biggest corporation in the world. So, you know, they could take a lawsuit. They could shed millions of dollars to prove a point. They don't really care. So, and that's part of the problem with these almost monopolies that we've created in big tech. And what makes it even worse is that we have people in office, especially in the federal government, who barely know how to use an email, nevertheless understand how corporations like Twitter and Facebook are, in fact, and especially Amazon, are monopolies, right? You know,
do you think that's a lack of like tech savviness from the politicians, or do you think that's just because they're fucking old? Like, serious? Do we need like a roof on because you have I don't think there's a minimum age for, I think 18 maybe for like a senator or a congressman, but like for president you have to be 35, right? It's like, do we need a ceiling on this? Like, once you're 70, fucking retire. Pelosi, Biden, all you cunts who won't give up power. Like, is it like Mitch McConnell? Sorry, not to just focus on the Democrats at all.
No, I agree with
Mitch McConnell. You know, there's loads of them. I can't think of any other like prominent old Republicans at this moment in time. But maybe because loads of them retired the last term round.
Yeah.
And now the Democrats are all planning to retire because they're going to get trashed in the midterms, I think. But like, what is it? Like, what's happening with this that our government has become so ineffective? And so, like, were politicians always this dumb, or have we reached like a point of degradation?
Well, have politicians always been this dumb? Yes. Well, let's see. Essentially, to become a politician, you have to win a popularity contest. So, yeah, quite possibly. But to go in relation to the big tech aspect, I think there is a lack of understanding about technology that is almost crucial, because I think it was one of the back and forths with Mark Zuckerberg, and they were asking the most like mundane, simple type of questions about technology that me and you have learned when we were teenagers, right? And they're still trying to understand how this works, you know. So you mean to tell me that email goes off into some, you know, space and then it just appears? Like, it's like, come on, man. Are we really having this discussion? No wonder. But then the other part is, I think some of them get paid to be ignorant. You know, I wish more people looked and saw the lobbyists that work within Washington, D.C. and who gives money to who. I wrote an article on my website talking about Democrats and the Republicans, the distraction that keeps on giving, because In the federal government, it's one big ploy. As much as Republicans talk about big pharma and all this stuff, we need to have questions for them. They both get paid by big pharma. They have the same type of lobbies. And then what's even funnier is that some of them leave Congress and go work for big pharma. So, I mean,
come on, like,
they
give
become
them
lobbyists
a bit of credit,
themselves.
Adam, please. Like, some of them go and work for Wall Street.
Oh, that's right. Some of them go work. Some of them actually go and work for big tech and become lobbyists for them too.
Yeah, well,
as a special favor.
A former deputy prime minister of the UK, Nick Clegg, he was in the running at one point during the 2010 election. His party was actually leading the polls at one point. They ended up just being the small party in a coalition in the end, because the UK doesn't like third parties.
Welcome to the club.
It's probably because of our electoral system, as you guys have. I mean, you've got a whole different clusterfuck of problems with your electoral system, but
yeah,
he is now like just head of Facebook, basically, Nick, like a former like deputy prime minister, and it's like,
yeah.
You think he would have got there just on his own merit if he wasn't a former deputy prime minister? You think Nick Clegg would have been elevated to the role of leading Facebook? It's like, okay,
yeah,
I believe
and
you.
and that's why, like, I talk about the merit. I talk about corruption. I talk about all these different things. Recently I met Ron Johnson. I went to Wisconsin and I heard him speak. And to be honest with you, I knew a little bit about Ron Johnson, but I didn't know enough to make like a particular decision about him. Personally, meeting him, he was a nice guy. Seems very relatable. One of the things I liked about him is that, for one, when he ran, he said, I'm not going to become a career politician. I'm doing this for a particular reason, right? He's a businessman. He doesn't need to run. He ran, he won. I'm listening to him talk, and he's running again, but he's very reluctant to do so. And part of the reason why I say that is because he said, why are they coming to me about Wisconsin state issues? That's why we have a state. The politicians within Wisconsin need to fix these particular problems, which means he's not taking on that power. He doesn't want to make a Wisconsin issue a national issue, right? He's saying, do what the Constitution says, do what the state allows for you to do, and lean on these people who are in power, who's supposed to do it. I have a completely different job within the Senate and the federal government. Why are they coming to me? How many politicians do you know would say, I have the power to make all these changes and I'll make sure I'll do. That's usually the speech.
Yeah.
And also listen to him talk. He's not leaving. And listen, the whole conversation, I wish it was recorded. I could share it, but like the whole conversation was kind of somber because that's who he is. He's being honest. And if you ask him a particular question that doesn't really have a positive ending, he's going to be honest with you and tell you, like, this is what it is. This is what the situation is. He wasn't a politician. That's not what I really took him as, even though technically he's a politician. He doesn't have that mindset. And so I have a level of respect for someone who's in that particular field who thinks that way. I've tweeted before that we need more people who don't want to be politicians to become politicians. And the problem is that we have people who have, delusions of grandeur, who want more power. And that's what's,
not just delusions of grandeur. Sorry, finish your point and I'll make mine.
No, you go ahead.
I was just saying, it's not even delusions of grandeur, I find. It's just like absolute megalomania at some point. Like this. No, but like right now I'm watching the UK, like the Conservative Party, pretend like they haven't been in power for 12 years. And you seriously, and I'm watching the Democrats being like, we will fix the country. And it's like, this is one of the points that Trump made that was very pressing. It was like, you fucking people have been there for decades. You have done nothing. You will continue to do nothing. Like, it's a frustrating period for me at the minute because I feel like I'm watching just like every institution, every like ideal that I thought people believed in, like disintegrate before my very eyes. And like I watched people talk about things like this happening, like with the Ukraine thing. I listen to people talk forever about how all the centrists and all of the establishment people, as soon as there's chance for a war, they all turn into war hawks. I'd heard this trope. And then I fucking watched it happen. Like with people who I didn't like have any inkling that would suddenly be war. Like people I didn't agree with, but like people that are suddenly just being like, you know, like war crimes. Like we need to invade. Like we like prepare the nukes. And I'm like, are you fucking insane? Like like what happened here? Like why does suddenly everyone want war? Like. You know, we've had this tentative peace for 70 years and look what we've done. We've eradicated more poverty than ever. Like we're doing amazing in the long scope of human history in this brief period of peace. It's like, don't go fucking it up, people.
Yeah. But so what you're telling me is that you don't stand with Ukraine.
Apparently not. Like I can't just like not want the war and be like, well, Ukraine are clearly being very brave and Putin is clearly being like very tyrannical, but at the same time that doesn't mean I'm like, yes, get the fucking warships ready. And like, you know, I think maybe the economic sanctions will be enough, hopefully. And that's what I would hope. And that all of Europe, at the minute, at least, and seems to have gone in tandem. Even the Swiss said, no, we will not do this. And that gives me some hope. So to finish this conversation, Adam, what are you hopeful about?
Oh, shit.
That's
What am
not
I
a good
hopeful
answer,
about?
man.
You know what? I'm pretty optimistic when it comes to the average person. The average person is waking up, including myself. And even though I was relatively politically active, or at least politically aware, I should say, I've become almost like a staunch independent. So, you know, some people might put me in the, you know, the conservative camp and the Republican. I've never voted for a Republican. I didn't vote for Trump. You know, I'm an independent, and I purposely kind of put myself in that position because I want to be able to look at both sides fairly. It's just that at the moment, the left is dominated by people who are seemingly delusional, and on top of that, placating to complete elitists who down talk the average person, who make them appear like they're just idiots, and their legitimate concerns are just made up nonsense because they watch TV too much, right? It's that kind of insolence that I cannot stand. So anybody who follows me on Twitter, one of the top things I talk about is the elitists, and many of them are progressive minded. And so, yeah, I can't stand that part. But what's happening is the average person is waking up, they're becoming more active within their lives, within their children's lives. I mentioned the people in Wisconsin. You know, when I went out and met Ron Johnson, I was also there with parents who decided to run for school board. They said they had enough and they're going to do something about it. I actually met one kid, I don't remember his name, but he had just graduated high school and he said, I'm running for school board.
What?
Right? Yeah. I think he was 18. And he said, I'm running for school board. He was very excited about it. That is what we need, right? No more of the activists who are just sitting on school boards, who ignore parents' concerns, right? Who hear a room full of loud people being upset and just say, whatever, we'll do whatever we want anyways. No more of that. Vote these people out, get them out, right? And become more involved. And if you think that there is a level of status quo that is acceptable and they want to change everything just because that's their initiative, then get these people out. So I think we look too much at the federal government. We look at national this, national that. At least within America, we have a lot of power locally, right? If there's something that's happening locally, even if in a city, you can do something about it, right? You can get these people out, you can get laws changed, you can put pressure on people, and things will start to happen. So I'm optimistic that the average person will wake up. Can I tell you what I'm not optimistic about?
Of course, go for it.
What I'm not optimistic about, and just to go to your side of the pond, is that the Premier League is now going to look like the NFL.
Yeah.
You
Football
guys
is
are going to
being
be
destroyed. It's really sad,
football
man.
is being destroyed. You're going to be taking the knee until racism is over. So have fun with that.
You know, right? I hadn't watched I barely watched a football game through the whole pandemic. Um, I didn't enjoy watching the empty stadiums. I felt like it was like training matches. And let's not
Mhm.
stab at the players. Because if you're used to playing in front of 40,000 people and suddenly there's no one there, it's going to mentally feel like a training match. You can't psych yourself up in the same way. And I just felt the
Yeah.
quality of football suffered, and I didn't enjoy it. I felt it was stale. And but then I was round at my cousins and seeing my uncle and auntie and everything, and we put on the Liverpool game. And I was like, all right, great, okay. Well, I always watch football with them. This will be fun. We'll watch the game first time, and they took the knee, and I was like, hang on, that's still happening? Like, really? Before every game? Like, seriously? Like, really? It just
Mhm.
feels like, because, at the time, I was like, you know what? I believe in everyone's right to protest whatever they want. If they want to take a knee, go for it. If the people want to boo them for doing it, go for it. Like, that's my take on it. I mean, I don't think the booing is very respectful, but, like, fair enough. Like, freedom of speech, boo what you want.
Mhm.
But that they're still doing it is so weird, man. Like, it's like, what are they hoping to achieve here? Like.
But that's the point. That's the point is to signal the intentions and that it's all virtue signaling. One of the things that set me off, actually, the same game, but in the American coverage, I was watching the Premier League coverage talking about the League Cup match, and they said, shockingly, neither of the teams are going to wear or hold anything talking about Ukraine. And they were like, yeah, I'm really shocked by that. I'm really surprised. And I thought to myself, why the fuck does it matter? Why does it matter? And come to find out when I looked into it, because I didn't see it initially, they had it on the billboard thing, like, we stand with Ukraine. Like, how much more virtue signaling do you want? They want the full gamut. They want to come out with a Ukraine flag. They want they want to talk to Alexander Zinchenko every goddamn game to talk about how he feels and what's going on. They want the whole nine of consistent virtue signaling. And granted, like, I haven't been watching the Premier League my entire life, like a lot of people, but when I got into it, it wasn't like that. And American sports was changing, and the Premier League was like the safe haven. Now watching the Italian league is more of a, they don't give a fuck. They just play the game. They don't care.
Yeah, but the
More so
football's
than
not as
the Premier
good,
League.
man. That's the
The
problem.
football's not as good. Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. The football's not as good, but like, I watched throughout the entire pandemic, and let me tell you, it was to the point where if the game started at 11 over here, I turned on at 11:05. That I got tired of it. It was so annoying. And one of the things I love about sports in general is that it's supposed to bring people together. Like, life is tough enough, right? Sports is supposed to be a distraction. It's not supposed to be a political environment. But you guys have taken the American model.
Yeah, I hope it doesn't last. I really hope it ends because, like, the thing that gets me, and I spoke to my cousin and my uncle about this when I was around their house and this happened. I was like, well, like, what are they hoping to achieve? Because my thought has always been like people make it out like the working class of Britain, the football fans are all like the racists, and like I have found that to be the furthest from the case possible. Like, if if you put on a red Liverpool jersey or a blue Chelsea shirt or I don't fucking care, like a white not Tottenham jersey if you have no self-respect, right? And and like, but if you put that on and you score, doesn't matter where you're from. Like, not even the slight. If you score that goal, that important goal, like, you could literally be fucking Osama bin Laden's son, and there would be like people whose daughters and sons went to Iraq, and they would be screaming for you because you
Yeah.
scored the goal at the right moment, and that is why football is beautiful. Like, in a place where there's meant to be loads of Islamophobia in the UK, right? Like, the most popular footballer in Liverpool Football Club, the god of that club, is a Muslim Egyptian. Like, and do you know what? No one gives a fuck That's the best bit about it. Is that, you know what? Because he seems like a good guy. He plays good football. That's it. That's all football fans care about. You know, if you're lazy, they will slabber about you. You know, if you're crybaby, if you dive, like, you know, all these things. But you know what they won't criticize is like if someone works hard. That's it. And that's always been my take about football. Like football fans are not racist. They don't care if you're scoring in the right goal. It's like the Democrats.
Yeah, and I think maybe, you know, like I said, I'm a novice when it comes to English football. I've heard of older players talk about, I got some racial abuse. There were some things happen.
There definitely was, man.
There definitely was. However, you know, when we keep going back to the past and ignoring what's happening today, that's done purposefully, I feel. I think it's completely disingenuous. The Premier League has built itself up to be the most popular league in the world, right? Rightfully so. And they're going to ruin it just like the NFL did, right? Or at least is doing, because I don't watch the NFL anymore. That's what it came down to. I am 100% about European football. I'm still into the Premier League. I do my best to get around the political stuff, but especially here, we have a league full of Black players who whine and complain as they make millions of dollars, right? How tough life must be for them. And now you guys have English players who are making millions of dollars who say, oh, I got some racial abuse online. Woe is me. My life is tough. Let me get in my fucking Mercedes, my Lamborghini, and go to my mansion.
It's really going to weigh on me while I'm cashing my $100,000 a week checks. Like
right.
That's what I feel like. And they're so tone deaf. You know, they don't get that, like, people are actually fucking struggling.
Right. Cry for me. Cry for me. You know,
it's not to say, again, not that racism doesn't fucking exist, but like, for those footballers, like, come on, man. Like, really? Like, this is if that's the biggest problem, someone shouted some abuse at you on the pitch, like, come on.
Yeah. I feel like when you make a certain amount of money, you no longer get to complain about trivial shit. At least publicly. Yeah. Publicly, you have zero right to complain about trivial shit. So, you know, if I was to become some big basketball player and I'm making, you know, $10 million a year, you will never see me wear a Black Lives Matter shirt. You will never see me whine and complain about racist abuse that I might get online. I will not share any of that stuff. Is it right? No. Right. But I'm not going to vocalize it. Why? Because I understand that people have it way worse than I do. And so to act like economics don't matter, you know, it's just like LeBron, who's almost a billionaire, who's like, at the end of the day, I'm still a Black man. You literally get escorted by police from stadium to stadium. You live in the most exclusive neighborhood in California.
Yeah, but he's trying to put himself in the same category as like Black guys in the 90s who got shot simply for existing, or like being in the wrong place at the wrong time with like the wrong cop. Like, he's trying to put himself in the same category as people like that. And it's like, I don't know what you call it. It's like grief theft, or I don't know, something like that. It's like they're trying to like hang on to the oppression that doesn't exist in their life, and they're trying to justify their existence based on that doesn't weigh on them anymore. And it's almost like maybe that's part of their identity, and they can't let go of that now that that's not who they are.
Yeah,
although maybe they're so far from it. I don't know.
It's the victim mentality, hence the book behind my shoulder.
yes. All right. I've kept you for long enough, Adam. So do you want to like plug your book and your Twitter and Wrong Speak Publishing and all those things, and tell people where they can find you?
Absolutely. So my book is Black Victim, Black Victor. I kind of call it, you know, a book about race, but in many ways talking about family, the importance of family. You know, what the real issue facing Black Americans are, while telling like my personal story, growing up in a single parent home, experiencing homelessness occasionally, and being able to try to come out from that and be in the position I'm at today. So, you know, essentially that's what my book is about. I also founded Wrong Speak Publishing. You know, it's an outlet for people to write openly, express themselves. More and more people are choosing to write for the website, so I'm really proud of that. And I think overall, I think what I'm trying to do on Twitter is just inspire thought, be myself, not be a political shill, which actually sometimes it's tough to do, because it's an environment that wants you to pick a side.
Especially on Twitter.
Especially on Twitter. But I have my viewpoints, I have my biases, but I try to be realistic, and not too political. I like talking about ideas, behaviors, like the Ukraine situation. I don't like talking about the war between Ukraine and Russia. I like talking about the reaction to the war, Ukraine and Russia. That's far more interesting to me. The people who are, COVID specialists are now all of a sudden war specialists. So yeah, I like talking about those particular things. They're far more interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, we've nearly done an hour and a half, so I think that'll be plenty for people to listen to. But I'd love to have you back on at some point, man. If you're ever in the UK,
Absolutely.
definitely give us a shout.
Yes.
Now that travel is no longer the completely forbidden. And yeah, I'll put the links for all your stuff in the description below, your book, your publishing company, your Twitter, etc., everything, so people can check that out. So yeah, thanks a lot, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for making it all the way to the end of the podcast. If you want to leave us a comment, that would be awesome. Please like, share, subscribe, and if you're listening on Apple, please leave us a review. Until next time, thanks for listening.